Hi, I'm Julio Cruz, and welcome to Crash Course US History. Today, our first topic is the stock market crash of 1929. Declines in consumer demand, financial panics, and misguided government policies caused economic output to fall in the United States. While the gold standard, which linked nearly all the countries of the world in a network of fixed currency exchange rates, played a key role in transmitting the American downturn to other countries. The recovery from the Great Depression was spurred largely by the abandonment of the gold standard and ensuring monetary expansion. The economic impact of the Great Depression was enormous, including both extreme human suffering and profound changes in economic policy. Some of the causes of the Great Depression were that during the Roaring Twenties, the U.S. economy and the stock market experienced rapid expansion, and stocks hit record highs. The Dow increased six-fold from August 1921 to September 1929. The market officially peaked on September 3rd, 1929, when the Dow shot up to 381. By this time, many ordinary working-class citizens had become interested in stock investments, and some purchased stocks on margin, meaning they paid only a small percentage of the value and borrowed the rest from a bank or broker. Additionally, the overall economic climate in the United States was healthy in the 1920s. Unemployment was down, and the automobile industry was booming. While the precise cause of the stock market crash of 1929 is often debated among economists, several widely accepted theories exist. Some experts argue that at the time of the crash, stocks were wildly overpriced and that a collapse was imminent. Hoovervilles, or shantytowns, were constructed of cardboard, tar paper, glass, lumber, tin, and whatever other materials people could salvage. Unemployed masons used cast-off stone and bricks, and in some cases, built structures that stood 20 feet high. The Hawley-Smoot Act is a tariff act of 1930. It increased 900 import tariffs by an average of 40% to 48%. Most economists blame it for worsening the Great Depression. It also contributed to the start of World War II in June of 1930. The Bonus Army was a group of 43,000 demonstrators made up of 17,000 U.S. World War I veterans, together with their families and affiliated groups, who gathered in Washington, D.C. in mid-1932 to demand early cash redemption of their service certificates. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation was a United States government agency tasked with assisting the failing banking sector in the years after the stock market crash of 1929. In 1932, Congress approved for the RFC to begin business with strict mandates that required the agency to issue emergency loans to banks facing the threat of going under. Franklin D. Roosevelt was in his second term as governor of New York when he was elected as the nation's 32nd president in 1932. With the country mired in the depths of the Great Depression, Roosevelt immediately acted to restore public confidence, proclaiming a bank holiday and speaking directly to the public in a series of radio broadcasts or fireside chats. His ambitious slate of New Deal programs and reforms redefined the role of the federal government in the lives of Americans. Re-elected by comfortable margins in 1936, 1940, and 1944, FDR led the United States from isolationism to victory over Nazi Germany and its allies in World War II. He spearheaded the successful wartime alliance between Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States, and helped lay the groundwork for the post-war peace organization that would become the United Nations. The only American president in history to be elected 4 times. Roosevelt died, however, in office in April of 1945. The New Deal was a domestic program of the administration of the U.S. President FDR between 1933 and 1939, which took action to bring about immediate economic relief as well as reforms in federal government's activities. The term was taken from Roosevelt's speech accepting the Democratic nomination for the presidency on July 2nd of 1932. Reacting to the ineffectiveness of the administration of President Herbert Hoover in meeting the ravages of the Great Depression, American voters the following November overwhelmingly voted in favor of the Democratic promise of a New Deal for the forgotten man, opposed to the traditional American political philosophy of laissez-faire. The New Deal generally embraced the concept of a government-regulated economy aimed at achieving a balance between conflicting economic interests. Much of the New Deal legislation was enacted within the first 3 months of Roosevelt's presidency, which became known as the 100 Days. The Brain Trust, also called Brains Trust in U.S. history, was a group of advisors to FDR during his first campaign for presidency. Raymond Moley, Rexford G. Tugwell, and Adolph A. Burl Jr. were all professors at Columbia University, and they were the 3 main principal members of the Brains Trust, although others served with them from time to time. The 100 Days was a period in the early FDR presidency during which a major portion of the New Deal legislation was enacted. Ah, yes, the mystery document. Here we go. The emergency banking legislation was passed by the Congress today. Is a most constructive step toward the solution of the financial and banking difficulties which have confronted the country. Who could it have been? Could it have been the Secretary of the Treasury, William Wooden? Cool. On May 12, 1933, the United States Congress created the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, or FARA. The organization's purpose was initially to distribute $500 million in federal funds to state agencies. These funds were grants and not loans. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation is a government agency designed to protect consumers in the U.S. financial system. The FDIC is best known for deposit insurance, which helps customers avoid losses when a bank fails, but the agency has other duties as well. FDIC insurance allows you to get your money after a bank failure. The Wagner Act, officially the National Labor Relations Act, its main purpose was to establish the legal right of most workers to organize or join labor unions and to bargain collectively with their employers. Although critics called the WPA an extension of the dole, or a device for creating a huge patronage army loyal to the Democratic Party, the stated purpose of the program was to provide useful work for millions of victims of the Great Depression and thus preserve their skills and self-respect. Keynesian economics was a body of ideas set forth by John Keynes in his General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, and other works, intended to provide a theoretical basis for the government full employment policies. It was a dominant school of macroeconomics and represented the prevailing approach to the economic policy among most Western governments until the 1970s. The Indian Reorganization Act was FDR's law designed to conserve and develop Indian lands and resources, to extend to Indians the right to form businesses and other organizations, to establish a credit system for Indians, to grant certain rights of home rule to Indians, and to provide for vocational education for Indians. Frances Perkins was the Secretary of Labor during the presidency of FDR. Besides being the first woman appointed to the cabinet, she also served one of the longest terms of any Roosevelt appointee. Butler versus U.S. The main issue of the case was whether certain provisions of the Agriculture Adjustment Act of 1933 conflicted with the Constitution. In the act, a tax was imposed on processors of farm products, the proceeds to be paid to farmers who would reduce their area crops. Court packing was a law that would have added one justice to the court for each justice over the age of 70, with a maximum of 6 additional justices. Roosevelt's motive was clear: to shape the ideological balance of the court so that it would cease striking down his New Deal legislation. Dorothea Lange was an American documentary photographer whose portraits of displaced farmers during the Great Depression greatly influenced later documentary and journalistic photography.